at the end of the day, buildings don't matter at all without people.
Yeah.
So if it's not being used, it doesn't mean anything.
Right.
So we have to always have that perspective that people are going to give value to the buildings that we create or the master plans that we create.
Yeah.
Welcome to the South Cypress Podcast, where we talk to members of the design community about their stories, knowledge, and expertise. I'm your host, Brandon White. Today I'm talking with Seth Rodwell from Nequette Architecture Design. Seth is the managing principal at Nequette and has worked with the firm since 2004. In this episode, Seth and I discuss Nequette's unique approach to architecture, specifically what it means to be composers of community design. We also talk about sustainability, attainable housing, firm culture, and the importance of designing buildings for people, not the other way around. Nequette is currently growing their team, so check out the show notes if you're interested in learning more about the positions they have available.
I mean, we're here in the Thomas building. This is such an awesome space. Every time I come in here, I'm just super impressed by the work that y'all did over here. But I don't really know the story, so maybe if there's like a 2-minute version you could share about the space and all that, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, as you know, the 2-minute version is we used to be done in Nequette. And we decided, we actually outgrew the current building we were in Mountain Brook, and Lewis and Jeff both had very similar passions, but also passions to for Lewis to be an ambassador of community design, and for Jeff really elevate his custom design work. And so it was a natural progression to basically say, hey, we're gonna venture off, and as we grew, we had to do that. And it was a great opportunity to think about maybe where we might be as far as an office, and what fits us best. And if we're going to be doing community work, what best way to do that than to actually live in the community of Birmingham? And so we spent 2 years right across the street from the Thomas building on 2nd Avenue North, and just got to get our feet wet and say, hey, is this the place we want to be? It wasn't long before we realized, like, this is a cool street. And if you know Birmingham, like 2nd Avenue North is one of the more hopping streets, and it felt right. And so we looked at buildings, Lewis looked at buildings, and it happened to be the one right across the street was available. It used to be Harold's Used Furniture. Lewis snagged it up. And it was an opportunity to kind of cement Nequette to be part of downtown Birmingham area.
And what year was this?
This was 2015.
Okay.
Somewhere around that. We were over there in 2015. 2 years later, around 2017, we purchased this building.
Okay.
The idea was to basically be in the space of the 2nd and 3rd floor for a little bit. But one day went up to the roof and said, when you're in Birmingham and you get up about 3 stories, you realize you have quite a view.
Oh, yeah.
And so we bent the code as much as we could. And we were able to put our office right on top of the roof to basically take advantage of the 3-sided view. We've got a beautiful view of downtown on one side. The other side is the Sloss Furnace, and off the back you can see the Vulcan. And so you very much feel a part of the city. And there's a real energy here that you don't necessarily get in other places around town. And it really does matter what you work in. It does affect how you work.
Yes.
And it's been a delight to be here in the office, and it promotes better design.
Sure.
It will infect you in a great way.
Yeah, that's great. Do you guys get down to El Barrio pretty often?
We do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
I would be
definitely a
there all
favorite
the
spot.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, but there's a lot of restaurants out
Oh
there.
yeah, you're just right in the
There's
middle there.
no shortage at all.
Yeah, that's awesome. Man. Cool. Well, getting into your background a little bit, when did you first know that you wanted to become an architect?
Yeah, I love that question. And you would think the answer is I knew all, forever that I was, and not at all. I was a 17-year-old that had no idea what he wanted to be.
Really?
And where do I want to go to college? What does that mean? No path whatsoever. I was a solid B- student, and which meant I had no direction of what I was good at. So I had to just do what I think a lot of 17-year-olds will do and say, well, what is my personality and what's a good fit? And I'd always played music, so I loved art. And I knew that there was something really incredible about the creative realm. And secondly, though, I loved the way that math would work out. It made sense. It was structured in a way that put things together. But at the same time, I had this idea that I was going to go into psychology in some sort of way. Because I love the psychology around people, around the environment, all that kind of stuff. And so I just, being the rational mind, I just systematically put all three together and I said, architecture kind of fits all three pretty well.
Yeah.
Why not give that a try? And it turns out probably it took about a year into the architecture program, chose Auburn, and they had a good school, that I realized, wow, I've never experienced anything that felt easy. And this felt easy and challenging at the same time. I said, this is what I was meant to do. And so I was lucky enough to be in something that energized me and I was passionate. It's the first time I ever felt that. And so I experienced getting A's, right? And I experienced the idea that I didn't have to regurgitate information and deal with multiple choice.
Yeah.
Right? And it was always exciting to create something spatially. And that's when I realized that I saw things spatially more than I did just through knowledge or reading. And that was exciting to know that this was a possible career path. So that's when I knew,
Yeah.
a year into college.
Yeah, that's cool. And I want to circle back to something later. We don't have to deal with it now, but I know that since becoming an architect, you've also found that you're very passionate about the business side of the firm
Yes.
as well.
Yeah.
And so maybe we can end
Sure.
on that at some, but I want to hear more about that too. So you joined Nequette. Was that your first? This was your first full-time role out of school, wasn't
Second. So
Second, okay.
Yeah, I was with a small firm in Raleigh, North Carolina for a year.
it? Okay.
Friend called that was working at Nequette, and I said yes.
Okay.
So yes, it's been let's see, since 2004. that
Yeah.
I've been here.
Okay. That's great. It's good to dig in roots somewhere and stay there for a while. You know.
Yeah.
Which doesn't feel like that happens as often anymore as what it used to. You know.
Yeah, I think there's a tendency to move around, but I always felt like I don't really know anything. So it just means that I feel like I have to learn a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're somewhere that exudes passion and they're keyed in to doing the right thing and doing good work, you can't help but want to stay there to learn that and absorb that. Hence why I'm still here,
Yeah.
because I still have a lot to learn and there's still great things to do. And that's why it doesn't feel like it's been 18 years. It doesn't feel like that at all. It feels like I'm just getting started.
Wow, that's cool. That's really cool. Well, one thing that I've enjoyed hearing from you about, and that is also right on the homepage of the website, is the approach to design at Nequette being composers of community design.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
We actually started because we had to rebrand ourselves a little bit. We knew we were all about community, but our past didn't necessarily say that with the work that we did. So we were excited to rebrand ourselves. Part of that exercise was to get with everybody in the firm, put out a bunch of words and say, hey, pick the ones that you think best describes what we do. To our surprise, composer came up
Really?
7 or 8 times out of 20.
That's cool.
It said, you're right, that really does say a lot about what we do. And the way I like to describe the word composer of community design is to to relate it to a composer or conductor of an orchestra. In a lot of ways, it illustrates a lot of what we do, which we may be the people kind of writing the song, right? And that's designing the building, but it doesn't stop there. It's basically, okay, here's the first draft, everybody. You give it to the owners, you give it to the contractors, and we need your input, because here we're co-authoring a story, a song, a building with these people, and it's greater because of that, not just because we're dictating it. And so we have to compose it first to get the idea and the big dream out there, get that input iteratively, put it out there, and a conductor says, okay, guys, we need to practice this, right? So that's the effort of getting it to the whole team. And there are lots of pieces and parts, and it's our job as an architect to understand all the pieces and parts, all the players, and what their role is, so that we're all playing the same sort of song. And at the end, after we practiced it and worked through the draft and perfected it, it should be better from the first sketch that we did. Because our job is to make sure everyone is keeping the same rhythm, at the same volume, knows when it's their turn to do a solo, knows when the song needs more energy and when it doesn't. So we reel back so that the vision's never been lost. And we have to do that. We have to compose that. We have to be composers throughout the whole process, because Nequette deals in the micro and macros. We're being asked to master plan, work with municipalities, work with neighborhoods, work with owners, contractors, multiple owners, rezone, right? But also we have to deal with how we actually execute details. How do we step up to a front door? How do we hinge this door? All the small stuff in between. So it takes the big picture mind, but it also takes us understanding each player in that process and in that project to be successful. And ultimately, I think that's what sets us apart, is because our scope is bigger than just the building. It's the design, the master plan, the diversity of product type. It's the branding of the community, all the way to the furniture of the amenities.
Yeah, it's a beautiful picture, and I'm struck by honestly, just the humility of it. I think that there's a way that, and I mean humility in the best possible sense, that it would be easy to design something, project that out to all the other stakeholders, and the message be, okay, we've designed this, don't mess it up.
Yeah.
And what I hear from you is, yeah, we're designing this, and it's an iterative process that grows and evolves in a positive way throughout the entire process.
Yeah, look, you're not going to solve problems by forcing an answer. And we've got a lot of problems to solve as architects. We can make an impact, and it's going to take more than us to do it. So it is iterative. It is a co-authoring of this work, and we can't do it by ourselves. If we continue to force the answer, I think we're going to run into some problems, and we may not actually solve the problem we went out to solve in the first place. And we're going to burn bridges, because it's all about relationships that we're creating too.
Yeah. That's going back to your love of people and psychology and understanding.
That's right.
Yeah, that's cool, man. One thing that you said a while back that stuck with me, and kind of moving towards talking about sustainable design, you said if it doesn't last 10 years, or if people want to bulldoze it 10 years from now, then there's no point in even talking about anything else related to sustainability.
Right.
And I know I'm butchering your quote, but you said something along those lines.
Yeah.
And that really stuck with me, because on the material side of things, it's really easy for us to get all wrapped around the axle of how much recycled content does it have? What forest was it harvested from? All the things that you read on the back of the specification sheet. But it seems to me that you can put all of those different parts and pieces together, but at the end of the day, if it's not timeless, then it's really not sustainable, no
Right.
matter how green the story is for the province.
Yeah, you said it well. Right? There's multiple approaches to sustainability. We tend to focus on, I guess, the lead point aspect of it, or the material aspect of it, the distance from which the emissions from it, right? But our approach here, I guess, is a little bit more simple. And you said it, right? It's all about how long these things last. And we can say, well, it's made out of stone, it lasts forever. But if nobody's using it, then it's kind of pointless, right? And so there is one thing that we cannot get more of, and it is land. So the first aspect of this is use the land appropriately. Get the most value out of it. And I don't mean densifying it to until it's just horrible, where it's just congested. I mean respecting it, planning it in a way that you know the end user will use it, diversifying it to where there's availability for many people, and putting a bunch of uses in the same piece of land so that it lives at night and it lives during the day. And that it's always being used, and it creates a place worth going to. And then the second side of the sustainability, which you hit on, is look, build good places, build strong communities, people will live in them, they will create relationships in them, hopefully good memories in them, and what they will give back to the community in the building, in the built environment, by keeping it up. It's okay that they add on, they renovate, because this is a place worth saving, because they take pride in the community that it is, and I mean the people of the community. And if it lasts 200 years, great. That's sustainable. What's not sustainable is maybe some good building, but the use of the building wasn't long-term. It didn't make sense long-term. Office buildings don't last that long. At the time they worked, but they weren't adaptable. They didn't have multiple offerings within the same land. So it gets bulldozed for some other better development at the time after 40 years. And the emissions that's wasted in that effort, I would say, is much greater than whatever's gained from a material perspective. Now, if you can do all three of those, now that's the secret sauce, right? But we're focusing on that kind of tactical approach of do the right thing for the land, build a strong community, and that thing's going to be sustainable.
What are some of the specific tactical decisions that you guys are making in trying to make that happen? Like, what are some of the particulars around keeping the community more adaptable, or the specific building more adaptable than what it would have been otherwise?
You provide different offerings of product. There's a diversity of product, different price points within there. There's kind of a transect on that land. Let's say there isn't a town center within a bunch of miles. There isn't a place to go. It's probably important to provide it, but not in the strip mall type of way, right? You've got to create a place for people to live, people to walk to that amenity, feel like they all are taking ownership of that and have the ability to be part of the amenity, and that it's not just for one type of demographic. We can't force people into a community to make it diverse, but we can create different price points that provide different opportunity for different people. And so we can do that if we have enough land, and we do that through a transect of product, eventually getting to a town hub that might have some amenity in there, that it's still within the 5-minute walk zone, because any longer than that, people get in their car, and make it walkable, not car-centric, people-centric. Hide some of that parking, create opportunities, pocket parks. These are just the simple principles that you put into play to make it successful. And people don't even need to know that that's happening. They don't need to know, like, like we've talked about, like a good painting, 10 people can look at it, 9 out of 10 of them will say, I just like that painting. They don't need to know all the reasons why. They just know what good is when it comes to art. They also know what good principles of community design is, whether they've been taught it or not. You go, I don't know why this feels better, but it feels better. It feels more comfortable. The streets are a little smaller. There's a bigger sidewalk. There's front porches where I can engage. There's a transition from private to public to private. And all these things really do work, and they play in how we react, in the space between the buildings. So a lot of ways, when you focus on the space between the buildings will take shape.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're for the right uses, and they create those opportunities for people just to simply say hi, then you feel like this is a good place. I'm around good people, and we're sharing in this experience together.
Yeah, and it's interesting how you describe it as 9 out of 10 people walk in the building and love it.
Right.
Where it's.
Or really the community. I mean, just the
Mm-hmm.
outside of the community, you'll find that they'll adhere to even more than maybe the building.
Yeah, it's like it's for everyone.
Yeah.
It's not this exclusive. It feels approachable, I think, is how you're describing it.
Yeah.
You don't have to be an architect to appreciate the work that was done.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it is accessible to everybody, so that's a public amenity for anybody to drive up to, because you do want to promote outside people of this community to come in here.
Yeah. This is the place you want to be.
Right, this is the place you want to be.
Yeah.
And that even makes it greater. So don't fence it. There doesn't need a gate, right? Don't fence it off.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. That's great. Talk to me about a well-designed master plan. Like, how do you see that playing out and the benefits of that versus a not so great master plan and then having to reinvent the wheel after the fact?
Yeah, so I'm more data guy. So I'll talk about like the facts behind it. What we've done here is, with a lot of key developer clients that we have, is looked at, okay, here's the traditional way of doing a site. Here's our way of doing a site. And if you just look at it from a bird's eye, they might say, wow, that looks expensive and this doesn't. Or this looks more efficient and this doesn't. What we've been able to show them is that, look, the amount of parking is the same here and here. It's just how you arrange all those parts and pieces that makes for a dynamic master plan, so that this actually has the same mix that this has, but this is a building wrapped around parking. You go to the sea of parking, you go right to your front door. We've all experienced it, right? But there's no interaction on foot. Here, we've turned the houses away from the street sometimes and created interior courts where people are passing by other people's front porch while they get to theirs. That's not a car experience, that's a people experience. That's a relational experience with the structures and the people that are in it. And we've been able to show them that the yield actually is the same, if not greater here, versus what's been done that hasn't necessarily been designed with that in mind, with those principles in mind. So that's a win from the perspective of the developer, because they're getting a yield and we can make this work financially. It's a win for us because these principles work. They have for thousands of years. They still work.
Yeah.
It's a win for the end user because they get to experience something that's been designed. It's design available for them. It didn't cost any more. We're just being intentional about it. And going back to some of the methods and principles of the past, and they work. And it's also a win for the municipalities. So something else that's really great about these mixed-use master plans is there's a company called Urban 3 which does analysis of tax revenue per acre.
Okay.
Incredible charts.
Yeah.
And what you'll find is, I'll use 280 for an example. I mean, that doesn't make any money necessarily outside of maybe the summit. So you'll have all these things in the red. It's not bringing in tax revenue per acre. Walmart doesn't bring anything. Suburbia doesn't bring in money either from the tax revenue, because the cost of infrastructure over time is more than what you're getting from tax of that land.
Interesting.
Right?
That's counterintuitive.
It's very counterintuitive.
Yeah.
So you think, no, so the idea that, and I don't fault the government, I just think that they're saying, well, someone wants to buy it, let's get it. That's money this year. But the long-term plan is that you're going to go on the red. Versus this building, for instance, a mixed-use building that has office, it has apartments, and it has retail on the bottom, will make like 10 times the revenue than an acre anywhere else, right?
Yeah.
So you see these spikes in the tax revenue in the green for mixed-use communities, and you go, why aren't we doing this? So that's a win for the government too.
Yeah.
And so the idea just being, this is a win-win-win situation.
Yeah.
If we hold true to these principles, look at this as a long-term investment. Let's hold the property, not sell it right off, so that we still want these things to last and be of quality. And then we're all gonna win in that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But this is a slow process. So something you probably never hear architects say is like, we almost have to water down our brand,
Wow.
because more of that becomes more accessible to a larger population.
Mhm.
It's not related to that question, but I think it's important to know, like, part of our mission here is to impact a lot of people. And you can do that through well-designed communities. So we're not just interested in servicing the top 2%, we're interested in servicing what I believe the underserved population, which is the 50 to 80%.
Mhm.
You simply don't have options for something that's been designed. And you can't get into that price point. So we need to water this down a little bit. We need to provide well-designed communities to the point that it becomes affordable, because sometimes when we do this, not sometimes, most of the time, we put a well-designed community, town center, mixed-use, diversity of product type community together, the price, it goes up, the demand goes up. So it tells you that you've got something that people like, but we can provide that to more people if we do it right.
And that's the answer, right? To have more of them, so that there's a higher supply of things like that,
Right.
so that more people do have
So
access
the
to it.
middle high class have availability. We don't do affordable housing, and firms that do have an incredible mission to do so. But there's still underserved demographic that doesn't have that availability of that type of product.
Mhm.
And you will find that if there's amenity, walkability, and some of those things we talked about before, they're willing to take less square footage.
Mhm. Oh yeah, for sure.
And we're all smart. The new generation is really keyed into this. It's like less is more
Mhm.
if I have these other things, right?
For sure.
And these are what really matter to me. It's not so much about the big bedroom or the big living room or the house that has to accommodate the one time every 10 years that you have 20 people staying there. But they don't think that way, and it's important because they know it's important to get out. They know it's important to be involved with the community.
Mhm. Yeah. When you're sharing this with municipalities, what's their typical reaction to something like this?
I think a lot of them get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what you have
It's
to
not
do
a
is,
super hard sell.
I don't think so. If it makes sense, I think where the hurdle is convincing, neighborhoods of that change is good, because we have to kind of get over the fact that rental isn't bad. A lot of what we do is rental. Less people want to own or can afford to own. Rental's still cheaper than owning. Maybe I don't want to live here for 30-year loan,
Yeah.
Maybe I just want to live here for 2 years, and that's okay because I want to transition to something else. So rental's not bad, and so you have to kind of create a different narrative there and
Yeah.
show them with some of the design and the work, show them past designs that this is actually a good thing. It's going to build your community up. in the long term, the value of your property should go up.
That's what I was going to ask you is once you let it play out 5 or 10 years, I bet all those homeowners that were frustrated about it to start with are really happy with what it's done to their community.
Yeah, I would think so.
Especially when
just from a simple economic, like it's gonna, your value went up. This is probably a good thing.
Yeah.
Change is just hard for most people.
Yeah.
And I think even for some municipalities, change is hard. Redoing zoning is hard. It's got to make sense. But we've got to break those. Those are kind of old regulations and break it with the idea that it's okay that it's mixed. We don't have to kind of partition off all these uses. It doesn't make sense. It's just not how we live today and won't be living in the future. And I think a lot of municipalities are just smarter about it now. They understand that. Especially if you present to them with a tax revenue that's higher.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
here's the numbers.
It's a long-term goal. This is good. This is good stuff.
Yeah. When you talk about diversity of product, I know that is a mix of commercial and residential aspects.
Yeah.
Tell me more about what that diversity of product typically looks like in one of your communities.
It looks a lot of different ways. It's, well, one, where are you doing it? What's the context? How close is that to a city hub? How away from that is versus, do you need to have more of a town center feel, or is this really more not commercial? It's more residential. This is more housing because right next door is kind of a commercial hub.
Mm-hmm.
So first you got to come at it from that zone. What's the need? What's the demographic? What's the mix? Hey, what can this place actually afford? What's the rental rate too? So you start to understand the need, and then you formulate a little bit of a mix from that. And then you start to master plan it around those needs, always with some idea that there's an amenity nearby or we're making part of the amenity. And so in those bigger developments where we are making a place, we might just be doing the town center hub, but what's around it is other architects or maybe us in some context doing the full transact. And when I say transact, it's from the 5-story with retail on the bottom to just the 3-4 story more apartments, walk-ups, and then you get down to a townhouse level, and then you get down to a duplex or triplex or sixplex, different mixes, different roof lines, right? Different materials. As you're taking one site and kind of going from urban to rural in some sense, all the way to single family parceled off lots that make some sense, but all in context. And some of those single families may have some ADUs. It's just that's an accessory dwelling unit, to where you could maybe rent that to someone else that could afford it.
Airbnb.
Right, exactly. You're renting it out. It happens in Homewood, right? Or other places. So that's the diversity we're talking about. That's the product type. And if it's mixed really well, it jives. And there's a lot of different people that'll live there, and they have the opportunity to experience all the amenity and take advantage of it.
Yeah. That's beautiful, because it seems like it would give the opportunity for people who are different to get to know each other and be walking past each other and start to build meaningful relationships. Whereas a lot of things in our world, it's so easy to get pigeonholed into, I am like this and I only spend time with people who are also just like this or just like me, or the same age and stage and background and all that sort of thing. And, it sounds like the work that you guys are doing really creates more of a blended community, like what a community actually is.
Yeah, the hope is some of these communities you could see, well, there's a place for my parents as they get older, but I could also see my kids living here, and you have multiple generations living together It's not entirely different than what some of the mix of suburbia is. It's densified and it has amenity wrapped around it, right? I think that makes for a dynamic place. When we just do one type of product in the same place and say this is the price point, you say no, we have option. No, you have option from 325,000 house to just a 500,000 house, which works too in some contexts if you have other communities around that and also have amenities. But for the most part, you're gonna get one type of demographic with that, and you can still plan those really well. But the opportunity to do one that has all those products is a really dynamic place, and you can't help but notice that when you go through it.
For sure. Yeah, it's less of that pull up in your driveway, close the garage door behind you, immediately go inside, versus how you've described being more walkable and interacting with people more. And
but it's kind of like thinking of the master plan is just an extension of my house.
Mm-hmm.
When I walk out the front door, it's really just another room that I exist in, and knowing that that's what you're buying.
Yeah.
So in a lot of ways, your house square footage is really high.
Yeah. It's a huge house.
We just have to break some of those trends that happened when we were living the American dream and everybody wanted the suburban house, and I think there were some real good principles in that, but we've kind of chopped it down to something that I think is a little bit false.
Mm-hmm.
Sense of community. And you talk about the typical experiences when you drive home, you're going in suburbia, there's no sidewalks, there's limited front porches, you drive into your driveway, you park in the garage, close the door, and you never have an experience where you get out of your car, walk to your front porch door, talk to somebody, say hi, and that's how you create relationships.
Right.
And so the community should give you opportunity to do that. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have your private space.
Yeah.
You should have public space. But I think it is our responsibility to create both those public and private opportunities for people where they can create a relationship, whether or not that was happening or not. So you can trust people.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like one of the examples that I'll get out my phone, but one of the examples I have for like suburbia is no different than the phone, which is a false sense of community. Where the phone really represents the fence around a suburban house. And we say we're buying into a community, but all we're buying is a house. The backyard's fenced off. There's no front yard interaction. And all we're doing is internalizing ourselves and saying, don't look at me. But I'm telling you I'm connected in the same way that we're next to people in line at the bank. If people don't even go to the bank anymore.
What's a bank?
If we're at a bank that we say we're connected as we're on social media, but there's people literally 2 feet away from us that if we put down our phone, we'd have a real conversation. And that relationship inevitably is going to be stronger than most likely the ones that you're having on social media. So it's the defensification of product, of community that we need to do, and put back some of those things we trimmed from a budget standpoint: trees, sidewalks, porches, actual clubhouses beyond the pool, playgrounds, these and walkability, right? So it's never too far that you couldn't walk there. You know how important trees are if it's in Alabama and it's that hot.
August.
Like you don't want to be walking where there's no trees. So we're going back to those core principles that really work.
Yeah, it's like you can we all know that we want community. We're designed for community.
Yeah.
And you can design a neighborhood in a way that facilitates that or that shuts that down.
Yeah.
Right? And Catherine and I were just talking the other night that we love our house and we love our neighborhood. The thing we like about it the most is our neighbors. We have fantastic neighbors.
Yeah.
And But I'll tell you though, every one of them that we know, it's because I went and knocked on their door and said, hey, we're the new neighbors, would love to meet you. Do y'all want to come over for dinner sometime?
You have to be intentional.
Yeah,
Like,
it doesn't just easily come to you. And that's, it sounds like the places that you're describing that could be at least a little bit more natural than what we experience.
We'll set the table. You still have to eat at it.
Yes.
But the table's there and it's staring you in the face.
Yeah.
And you still have to be intentional to get around that table and talk to people. But it's our job to create that environment for which it can happen.
Yeah.
And so much of the built world doesn't necessarily have as much of that as you would wish.
Right. Yeah. And it just sounds like it just takes a lot of intentionality and thought to get it there, and maybe that's the reason that a lot of it doesn't have that, is because it's not
there's a lot of constraints. There's
a
lot of constraints. So the path we're taking is not the path of least resistance. It's going to take time. So this is the long game we're playing. This is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And also knowing that, I think we're doing somewhat of the scientific method where we're testing, iterating, and then doing it again. Testing, iterating, doing it better.
Yeah.
Testing, iterating, doing it better. It's okay that we might fail sometimes, but we're going to learn from it and do it again and do it better.
Yeah.
Not to try and craft the perfect building.
Right.
Right. And oh man, get so right into it that we're dissatisfied when one detail doesn't work.
Right.
From a designer's perspective. At the end of the day, buildings don't matter at all without people.
Yeah.
So if it's not being used, it doesn't mean anything.
Right.
So we have to always have that perspective that people are going to give value to the buildings that we create or the master plans that we create.
Yeah. I love that. But that's not an easy thing to do, that constant iteration and being willing to try things and learn and do it better the next time and admit that the way we're going to do it this time was actually better than last time,
Yeah.
That's a hard.
But that's what practice is.
Right.
So we practice architecture.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Or you practice what you do. It's all an effort to get better, right?
Yes, absolutely. But again, it takes a certain level of humility to do that.
Yeah.
And it's like humility and motivation, to be willing to move towards that. So
that's right.
So obviously the culture at Nequette has to be one that is conducive to that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, that seems like it would be incredibly important to create an environment where you have people that think that way and operate that way. Tell me about the culture at Nequette and how you've created a place where your team operates like that.
Well, it's not a shock, it's intentional.
Yeah.
And it's about the people, but it's about our values and how we behave that ultimately creates that culture. One, we recruit based on values, not solely on skill. And so I always kid with anybody we're interviewing, I feel like this is speed dating.
Oh yeah,
it's
totally how it is.
And what you
we just met, but
right, we just met.
Yeah.
And I'm about to make a commitment to you, and you real quickly to assess things in that typical way, which is, what movies do you like? Where do you like to eat? And are you, what's your favorite color? And it seems weird, but that's how we evaluate it. And if we're not careful, you do the same thing with these huge job choices that you're making.
Oh, yeah.
You're looking on a web page and you look at this. You look at all the buildings on that webpage and you go, oh yeah, this is what I want to do. This is the kind of stuff. That's essentially like picking somebody based on the fact that they like the same movie or like the same food. Now we all know, because we've all been in relationships.
That's not the best way to do it.
It isn't, shocker. But we all know that when we're in relationships, we inevitably break up not because we stopped liking the same food, it's because our values were never aligned in the first place. And so we have to hire based on that. And you don't have to be totally aligned in all the same values, but if a bunch of them jive together and they're the same, then the byproduct of a culture of people that have that same value structure will be the good work. It's not the opposite. You don't put awesome work around people and then expect them to behave in that same manner. So it has to be that way. That's number one. Number two is really identifying what's important to you. What is our purpose? What are our values? Where are we going? And how are we going to get there? And then I really think values really are meaningless on a wall unless you're actually behaving in those values. So we have to constantly just tell ourselves, all right, about to make a decision. Is it a yes or no to this client? Is this the right move? Are we cutting too much here? Whatever the decision is, look back on those values, and we've got them up on the wall, but look back on those to be the litmus test for what the answer should be. How are we going to behave? What's our response here? If we continue to do that, then eventually it becomes a habit. You want to be a great firm. The other example is like, you want great teeth. What do you have to do? You have to brush your teeth. Yeah. And I think you can say that I want good teeth, but unless you're willing to put in the work to create the habit to brush your teeth, it'll never get to the point that you don't even think about it anymore. Right? And then that becomes part of your identity is, well, now you have healthy teeth because you did all this. Well, we have to do the same thing as a firm and really coach that, preach that, and lead by that example constantly and always reference back to it. Here's what we believe. Here are our values. And in this instance, we can kind of look at that and say, that's not a line we're going to cross.
Yeah. Well, because so often there's 5 right answers. And it's just a matter of figuring out, okay, which one of those right answers lines up with who we are.
Right. Yeah, and you have to make that decision all the time. And so we bring on those people that also are able to elevate that further. And they, in the culture of curiosity, the culture of learning is really important. There's, like the ideal team player you've heard of is humble, hungry, and smart. You need a combination of all of those things. So bringing in people that understand that, setting that as a real clear expectation of who we are, so that they don't have, misaligned expectations after a year from now. So we're not lying to them. Keep it real.
Yeah.
And then when you say something, believe it.
Mm-hmm.
That takes time. Like you have to really identify, do you believe it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then another part of our culture, I would say, is I've heard people say this, and I think it's a good 2-word phrase that represents who we are. But we're an approachable passion, approachable and passionate. It's accessible passion, and that can be contagious. We're not holding it back.
I love that.
We're giving it out. But people want that, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, if you believe it with your heart, put it out there, and want to know that you're going to pass it on, because what happens after I'm off this planet? Let's make sure there's a legacy to pass on. Let's make sure that they got everything that we learned and more. And so that's the approachable passion part. We're not stuck up. Yeah. Leave your ego at the door, but we're still confident. Right?
I love that, man. Yeah. It's funny, our core values at South Cypress are passion and humility. And we describe humility in a very similar way to what you did approach.
You have to have both confidence and humility, like blended together.
Yeah.
But it's really hard to be confident if you don't do the work first. Yes. Learn, practice, train, and then you can coach, and then you can really give that back.
Yeah. How long have you guys had those core values named?
Since we had to rebrand ourselves when we were in Nequette, and so now there are practices to that. Every Monday we're going to talk about those values. We have to make sure we can actually say them and remember that.
Does everybody
Before we can
enjoy
actually
it?
behave in those. And that's what's fun about here is like we're just getting started.
Yeah.
Like there's still a lot about this that we're immature.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but we're mature enough to know that we're immature in that area.
Yeah.
And to get better and to grow, we're gonna wrap a little bit of structure around this. We're gonna really define where we're going. And be okay if it changes and iterates along the way.
Of course.
As long as we're solving real problems
Yeah.
and we're doing the right thing along the way, then it's all good.
Yeah. And I feel like once you identify those core values, maybe you're open to tweaking those, but they don't really change a whole lot. I mean,
Yeah.
for us, we identified them a while back, and I feel like South Cypress has been 3 different companies since then.
That's right.
But those things have stuck with us. You
Yeah.
know, like we haven't deviated from
That's right.
it just gives you something to go back to, especially when it's not an aspirational thing. It's no, this is who we are.
This is who we
how
are.
operate. Yeah.
And if there are behaviors that are against that, then we're gonna have a conversation. So there is a line, and everybody understands that coming into it,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
But the wonderful results from that, it's worth doing.
Mhm.
It's worth being part of, for sure.
Yeah, because when somebody's aligned with the company that they work with, they're going to be happier. Like the rest of their life is going to work better when their time at work is aligned with who they really are
Yeah.
versus something else, you know?
Yeah.
One of my favorite sales authors is Jack Daly, and I actually heard him speak at a Vistage meeting probably, I don't know, it's probably been 5 years ago. Drew invited me to come as a guest.
Yeah.
And he said, the most common question that I get from sales managers is, how do I motivate sales reps? And Jack said, I'll tell you how. You hire them that way. And you hire them motivated, or you're not going to motivate them. And I think that's so true about core values too. You don't find some hot shot person, bring them in, and then teach them how to be passionate but also approachable. You've got to hire them passionate and approachable, or else that's just got to be baked into who they are, or else that's probably not something that you're going to change.
That's right.
Well, man, this is great. So you were an architect
Mm-hmm.
for a long time. What was the transition like for you to realize, okay, I'm passionate about design, but I'm also very passionate about the business side of things? Like how did that come about?
Probably the same way it comes about for most people is that your first years are kind of whirlwind because you're learning.
Yeah.
You're practicing. You're excited and energetic about what's happening. So your focus is on you, and rightfully so.
Yeah. Just figuring out how to do the job.
And you're excited about, progressing or doing something that's impactful and meaningful, and just getting in there and doing the work
Mm-hmm.
with the idea that you are going to get better. So there comes a time when that starts to shift. And probably for some people is when you start to have children, it shifts. It forces you to start thinking, beyond yourself. But I think there comes a time where things start to shift. You go, I think I know something. And I think I've learned something. This is pretty good. I'm kind of proud of myself for what I've learned. What am I doing with that? Am I doing something with it? Am I keeping that to myself? And when you start to shift and you say, wow, before I think my success was defined by many things, right? And a lot of them were, this is who I am, this is what I'm doing, this is where I'm going. And eventually you start to shift and you say, well, I think my success is really defined by the success of the people around me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a shift of leadership. That's all it is. And are you thinking about others? Are you thinking about how they will get better? How can you help them to be their best selves? Because one day I'm not going to be here. And what have I passed on? Have I shared any of that? Right? And so it was always for me that outward look, to the point that I'm like, well, let me just act like I'm always trying to train someone how to do my job,
Yeah.
you know, to take my job, with the idea that maybe I won't even be here one day, but then they've learned everything I learned, and then it's great. And you realize when you're building the future, you're less concerned with necessarily the present or the past things that happened. And that's what shifted for me. So, okay, I like the architecture part, but tell me about the business part. So there's a lot of questions, you know, like how does that work? How do you do that? Operationally, how do you motivate people? How do you make a system out of something? How do you hire people? How do you build this? And what do you really have? All these kind of questions that kind of motivate you to learn more and to get excited about creating some of that and building it. So that was a natural progression for me, because I was never necessarily a blank piece of paper architect. I want a little bit of variety in my life.
Yeah.
So the variety of being able to build business, to understand the numbers. Are we profitable? Like at the end of the day, I mean, if we're not profitable, how are we helping our employees?
Yeah. And how long are you going to be helping?
Right. How long are you going to be helping? Like, are you going to
Yeah.
and then are you going to do waves of hiring and firing?
Yeah.
You know, that doesn't sound like a really good business model. That doesn't sound like something that's fruitful for anybody that's in leadership. And because it's not the buildings that motivate us, right? It's knowing that we're building people and helping their families be secure. So at the end of the day, I want to make sure that they're provided for. Do we have something of value? Yes, we do. So we should maximize on that value, because we have something to bring to the market. We have something to bring developers, and we're excited about it, and we know it is of value, and that value should be passed on to everybody that works for us.
Yeah.
And that just means you're going to get into the business of it.
Yeah. Yep. That's awesome, man. I love that. It's just, there's so much value and so many good things that come from good people running good companies, trying to do the right thing.
Right thing.
People. You know?
Yeah.
Just that simple thing I'm just convinced that it's incredibly impactful, you know?
Yeah. And sometimes that flies under the radar because it's not as, glittery.
Yeah. It's maybe not the best way to get Instagram followers, but
I just say stay the course, because you're doing that right thing.
mm-hmm.
And good things will come to those who wait.
Yeah.
And you've got to put the right foundation down. You got to feed the soil, and good fruit will come of it. But you have to wait.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm convinced that's what can happen when you know you're doing the right thing, and the designs are the right designs,
Mm-hmm.
and they're towards a greater effort than yourself.
Yeah. So you guys are planning on adding some more people to your team, right? Isn't that? Tell me about that. Tell me about it.
Well, we've added a good bit of people lately, to a good point. I mean, there's I guess the way to say it is, we want to be big enough to grow you, but small enough to know you, sort of deal. We have tons of opportunity, great opportunities we want to be able to say yes to. So we need really skilled people in a lot of different areas, because the scope of work we do involves a lot of different disciplines. So we absolutely need great people doing that have experience, and people that are just learning and want to learn that and are passionate about it, so that we can impact more with the work that we do. So we have to grow. And we've done that in the last year, and certainly want to grow a little bit more. The other way that we're growing is to really figure out ways to be efficient. Are we using the right tools for the job? This gets into software and how we design it. Yeah, exactly. And then how we design it. Are we doing it the right way? What about what we've done before can be copied in the most healthy of ways when I say that? Because sometimes you redo something from scratch, and the reality is you already did it very similar before.
Yeah.
But we need to we need to be solving problems in the marketplace, which is we don't have enough labor. We don't have enough skilled labor.
Yeah.
It's really expensive.
Very true.
And oh, by the way, we need you to do it in half the amount of time. So if we're not smart about how we put buildings together from a drawing perspective, if we're not learning how to use the resources and the software correctly, then it's going to take a certain amount of time for us to do it. But if we can deliver consistency of a known quantity, of a known budget to developers because they've seen something similar before and they rely on our quality and our efficiency and do it, then they'll get it out faster and at a more reliable economic value. So that's the other way we can grow. So how can we grow without growing in headcount?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's a real balance to growth to an headcount. Culture can change if you grow too fast.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And so you really want to balance that. I think you go in waves, and you also want to stay ahead of the market because we want to have time to innovate as well. So make sure there's enough people that you have so that you can spend time in the lab.
Yeah. Well, in a creative field, you can't be running in the red all the time and still be creating in an innovative way. I mean, it's just, very different.
And when you figure out how to actually do that, let me know.
I will. I'll keep you posted. Have a few more conversations. Well, I've enjoyed this so much, Seth. Is there anything else that you'd like to talk to in terms of your approach to design or the culture here at Nequette, or anything else that you'd like to?
No, I feel like we covered a good bit.
It's been a good talk.
Yeah, and I just think architecture is such a wonderful profession, and it takes so many different tangents in so many different areas. But at the end of the day, it's a privilege to build something that's tangible, that casts shadows, and has the ability to elevate people's standard of the built environment just a little bit.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, if we're part of the background of a good memory, then we've done our job and impacted it in a certain way. So
that's a beautiful picture.
We're just getting started, and I feel like I'm just getting started, and that's what makes for a good career.
That's awesome. Well, if somebody wants to check out the opportunities that you guys have available or apply to join the team, what's the best way for them to go about something like that?
Yeah, the best way is on our website, nequette.com. We definitely get connected with us through Instagram. We're always posting, and a lot of that's some of the culture of the firm internal, but also some of the work we do. And connect with us that way.
Yeah.
And if you want to pick up a phone the old school way, you just call.
Easy now.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, cool. Well, I try to end these conversations with asking our guests what's something that's bringing them joy in this season of life. And so it could be a new flavor of coffee, could be a cool project that you're working on here at the office, just anything at all, just something that's bringing you joy.
What's bringing me joy is all the new faces that have come on. It brings energy, and when you meet new people, right? This is a new community that we're bringing on, and it will only strengthen you, and it only get you more excited for what's to come next.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. I love that. Hey, thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Brandon.
It's been a good conversation.
Yeah.